Prime Minister, you were at the NATO summit, another one of these compelling, powerful video addresses by President Zelensky. Let me ask you, can Ukraine win this war?
I think Ukraine can certainly win. I don't think it's going to be easy. I think that the situation for the Ukrainians is grim, miserable. I don't think we've seen anything like it for 80 years in Europe, and what Putin is doing is unconscionable. But there's a sense in which Putin has already failed or lost, because I think that he had literally no idea that the Ukrainians were going to mount the resistance that they are. And he totally misunderstood what Ukraine is. And far from extinguishing Ukraine as a nation, he's solidifying it. And that's, as I said in what I said to the NATO leaders is, since a month ago, that's the thing that has really emerged as this giant geopolitical fact, that he can't subjugate Ukraine. He can't win in that sense. And so that is a colossal thing that the Ukrainians have on their side. Against them, they have this brutal war machine. Our job is to do whatever we can to give them the tools to protect themselves.
And when you say Ukraine could win, do you mean they could win on the battlefield, grind the Russians down, or win in the sense of make an occupation impossible?
It's probably the second more than. Look, I'm not a great military expert, but that is where we think that things could certainly go. And there are a number of possibilities. It is still possible that Putin could continue to take heavy losses, could continue to deal death and destruction to the cities in the way that he is, to Kharkiv, to Mariupol, and all the others. And that's why we've got to do more to help the Ukrainians. And I stress that I think the Russians are resorting to type. So that they think of Aleppo, think of Grozny. What they are expert at is standing away from these great urban centres, mercilessly shelling them and bombarding them with rockets. And that's what Putin is now. That's what he's resorting to now. And what we need to do is help the Ukrainians to, if we can, to take out that equipment, take out those rocket launchers and that artillery.
Now, you've obviously formed quite a rapport with President Zelensky. How do you see him as a historical figure? Is he up there with Winston Churchill? I
think he's extraordinary, and I think he's certainly Churchillian in his technique, and he's brilliant at mobilising his people, and and the people of Ukraine are the lion. He's privileged to give the roar, but it's more than that. He's doing very much what Churchill did in using all his diplomatic skill to get allies to come in on his side, and he has been very successful in that. It was only a few months ago that the United Kingdom was the only European country to give actual weapons to support the Ukrainians. You've now got dozens, and that's thanks to the skill and courage of Volodymyr Zelensky.
You say Churchillian in the way that Winston Churchill won over allies. Churchill stood alone, but ultimately he won only with the hard power of allies. Do you personally regret that, yes, the UK and NATO are providing equipment, but you cannot ultimately provide that guarantee? You cannot get boots on the ground. Ukraine, in a sense, is on its own.
And yes, I think it'd be fair to say that every leader around the table feels that agony that of Volodymyr Zelensky, that no, there's no Western democracy that's talking about boots on the ground of their own troops. Nobody's talking about sending up their own fighter pilots to take out Russian fast jets, which is what you need to do for a no-fly zone, or to take out the ground-to-air missiles that are also vital for enforcing a no-fly, or taking out those missiles is vital for enforcing a no-fly zone. That's not on the agenda. But I think what is happening, if I could just sort of give you a sort of sketch of a potential future, what is happening is that the extent of global sympathy for Ukraine and the massive emotional outpouring which we all feel when we look at what's happening is leading to this desire to help with humanitarian aid, help with refugees, but also help with kit. And the more that goes in, the more that kit is the equipment, the weapons are helping to change the face of battle in Ukraine and giving the Ukrainians the tools that they need. And over time, you can imagine that even if you can't have an Article 5 guarantee for Ukraine, I mean full membership of NATO, inside the thermonuclear umbrella, as it were, you can imagine that the Western sympathizers of Ukraine will provide so much by way of equipment, training, intelligence, as to create a kind of deterrence for Ukraine by denial. Deterrence by denial of Russian possibility to invade again. And so what I'm talking about is, as it were, so strengthening the quills of the Ukrainian porcupine as to make it in future indigestible to the Russian invaders.
And would that military help guarantee any peace agreement between Russia and Ukraine, or do you not take those peace talks seriously? You think Russia's playing a game?
I think it's very important, and I think all colleagues around the table today who are continuing to work on negotiations, and I discuss continually with Volodymyr about potential for diplomatic solutions. Of course, I think that's entirely the sensible thing to do. Everybody wants peace, including the United Kingdom. This thing, if this thing could be solved, it would be fantastic. I've got to tell you that I'm not optimistic that Vladimir Putin really wants that. I think he's decided to double down and to try to Groznyfy the great cities of Ukraine in the way that he's always tried to do. And I think that's a tragic mistake, but that's what he seems to be doing at the moment. Therefore, we need to do more as the West, intensifying the sanctions, sending more missiles, as we announced today, 6,000 more missiles, toughening up our sanctions, doing more to stop leakage of Russian gold, all the ways in which we can tighten the screw on him.
And Russia is listening to this language, and today Moscow has said you are leading the anti-Russia forces. Are you a marked man?
No, look, I think there's nobody around the table in NATO, certainly not in the G7, who feels anything but sympathy for the Russian people who are being very badly led. I'm a massive Russophile and always have been, and I believe that Russia is a great country with a great language, culture, and civilization, and always have done. And as I've said before, I think I can tell you without fear of contradiction, I'm the only UK Prime Minister to have been called Boris. So I'm not remotely anti-Russian. But the regime of Vladimir Putin is tragically, I think, betraying Russia's real interests and is doing devastating damage to Russia's reputation. And the sooner that ends, the better.
So strong criticism of Russia, but do you think you have a consistent record on this? Do you feel comfortable that you gave a peerage to Lord Lebedev after he appeared to tolerate the Russian annexation of Crimea? He talked about that Crimea had been Russian for a very long time.
I think it is really, I mean, I go back to my last answer. I think it is really, really important that in our discussion of this whole thing, we shouldn't play the Kremlin's game and seem to be anti-Russian or to be anti-Russian people just because they're Russian people. And I was very proud when I was running London that we boasted all sorts of people. We had loads of people from Russia. We also had 400,000 French people, I seem to remember. I think I was the mayor of the fourth or fifth biggest French city in the world. So, you know, I think you can disagree profoundly. No more than disagree. You can be viscerally hostile to what Vladimir Putin is doing, but that doesn't entail any hostility to Russians.
Two summits here today.
And shouldn't.
Right, there's two summits here today. You're not going to the third one, the European Council. We all know why that is, but President Zelensky is addressing his dream to join the European Union. Do you think you should apologise to him and to the Ukrainian people for mentioning in the same breath Brexit, the struggle for Brexit, and the struggle... Well, no, because Petro Poroshenko, the former Ukrainian president, who admires you greatly, said, Boris Johnson, don't say that. People are dying in my country. Nobody died over Brexit.
And I totally agree with what Petro said, and you're absolutely right. But that was not an analogy that I was making. I'm afraid that was wildly misconstrued. I said it, I think, in the self-same passage, that there's been nothing like what we're seeing in Ukraine since 1945, and it is a horror, and it can't be compared to anything since 1945. And we need to recognise that this is a pretty crucial moment for us all. And I said this to colleagues at the G7 and NATO, and we need to think about the decisions we take now, because if Ukraine is engulfed and Putin gets his way, then in one way or another, and you know, the tragedy is there are several varieties of outcome that Putin can portray as a kind of success. But if that were to happen, it would be a catastrophe for the world, a catastrophe for Ukraine, and we've got to do everything we can to stop it.
Finally, you're a very lucky general, aren't you? This war is going to save what was a very precarious premiership after all those claims about Partygate, being interviewed by the police, interviewed in a written form by the police. What does it say about your premiership that it takes the most serious war in Europe since the Second World War for you to escape? I
think what it says is that we're very lucky to live in a country where journalists can quite properly go hard on this sort of question, this sort of issue, because I can tell you, Nick, that is not what happens in Vladimir Putin's Russia, and it's certainly something that we want to make sure continues to happen in Ukraine.
So you welcome tough questions about Partygate?
So that's, yes, of course, that is what it's all about. And it's about, and I mean it quite seriously.
Well, let me test you on a tough question. Let me test you on. How do you feel?
There's very little I can say about it.
But how do you feel that you're there with all those world leaders, and they're saying that's the guy who made the rules, and then he didn't observe them?
I think what people understand is that if Vladimir Putin lived in a democracy, and if Vladimir Putin had Newsnight on his case, and people asking him really penetrating questions about what he really thought he was doing in Ukraine, and whether he really understood what kind of people the Ukrainians were, and if he'd really thought it through, I don't think he would have made the catastrophic mistake that he's made. And in a way, what he has done, this appalling invasion, is paradoxically an advertisement for the importance of the very system that he's trying to destroy in Ukraine. That's what we're trying to protect.
Prime Minister, thank you for talking to Newsnight.